I'm going to start by reading some poems from my first book. Then I'll read some new poems that I feel kind of iffy about. They're early drafts, and I'm not sure if they're either really, really good or really, really bad. So I guess you can decide for yourself. And if I have time, I will like to read the first page of my novel. So I'm writing a novel secretly. And I say secretly because I have literally only written one page. And I think that's a little bit embarrassing to say you're writing a novel if you have one page. But I am trying to perfect the page, and when it's perfect, then I'll move on to page 2. And I know that's a really bad way of writing a novel, but that's my method. This poem is called One Hell. Is this too loud? This is fine? Okay. One for busybodies, one for frying chickens alive, one for crying aloud in the night at the beginning of night watches, one for eating sweets with rice, one for butterfly collecting. God, what an evil hobby. Gassing living things to itemize in your hovel in England. One borderline, one bedroom disaster mansion, one black hole and bad experiment, one romantic wow after another, one forest becomes abundantly fell, one Millie Helen, the quantum of beauty required to launch one warship. One snatches us from fairgrounds, wriggling out. One sifts you into aerosol, a spray of rose oil pretty as powder, adrift within waves of radio water. One downgrades bodies to zero status and wakes up whistling Dixie. One is a killing jar, even calls itself that. One of one desire. Eat every animal in God's good claymation. This is called To Hell. Massive ships carry massive ships to ship graveyards. Aircraft on back of aircraft. Our construction of the Brooklyn Bridge, cables eager to catch humans, humans otherwise caught in a net of telephone wire, humans assimilated into the larger Borg. A French revolutionary politician gave each day of the year its own true name. Pitchfork, maple syrup, silica, scythe, barrel, bed straw, dung, crucible, plague. I've come to admire toned down language in manic habits of the monstrously lonely, as I like the laid-back vernacular scientists use to label Leviathan things. Very large array, huge, large quasar group, the big crunch, the weak force, newfound blob, extremely large telescope, spaghettifying, great dying. Nothing just is anymore. Everything super is. On top of mainstream madness in planets, post-humans are more than biological. Plus humans are typically 8 feet tall. A billion brains symphonize in real time. Immaculate simulacrum of precisely 1 cubic meter. An asteroid terrorism. And slow-moving wall of ice. Ice that overtakes some houses. Perfect ice circle growing on some rivers. Unusual snowing, freak winter of terror. Small mammals freeze where they stand. And this is the last poem on my first book, and it is called What Fresh Hell Is This? 1. You ask me, but how will I know it's you when we meet in a future life? Everything is omen, and all numbers relevant. If you spot a man sweeping the entranceway, and your eyes meet, and you feel many flurries of a crush as he feels the same, that's me. Showing symptoms of generational curse, bull-headed and illiterate till 7 at the age of salvation. There at the funeral for some enemy of the state, you, clever enough to be invited, I might be the cardinal. I may weigh as much as 1,000 lesser night jars. You will say you want to talk about God. I will say we'll get to that. 2. Psychologists reveal that while reading any text, we adopt its belief and bias. Comics, the Bible, this book, your primer for my coming iteration, learn that life is a terrible wrath to pass down. In remakes of our lives, we are trapped in moles cast when we were young and hated ourselves. Observe some stranger to diagnose virility and politics, how she handles a drink. Like carrion crows or ravens, rascals of the sky, identify all animals last seen near your dead as possible dangers. Try to stay in the present, which is bluegrass, the violence, incarnadine, then the magnesium of the self, uranium of who I really am. Look at me to see a black rainbow of human vice. You will know me by bushmeat for sex behaviors, my classical unevolvia. You will know me, Mary Alice, sheepdog of misinformation. 3. And this is why I cannot get on board with reincarnation. The next thing that always happens is we are ghoulish. We could have done good, but we chose bad, 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 all the same, all the way around. Instead of do not resuscitate, we really should leave alternate instruction. Please do not reincarnate. Now repeat after me a prayer for no other lives forthcoming. I beg permission to return to my most final death. Good night, planet Earth. Good luck, humanity. Okay, so I think I have just enough time to read one new poem and then the first page of the novel. This poem is called Ancestor Syndrome. All the poems in the book so far are called Ancestor Syndrome. The title of the book is Random Acts of Kindness, or Fire Baptized Holiness Church of God of the Americas Incorporated. The story of that is I went to a clinic and there was a drop-down menu to put your religious denomination, and there was like Baptist, Episcopalian, and then there was Fire Baptized Holiness Church of God of the Americas. And I Googled it, and it's actually incorporated, which I liked even more. So this is called Ancestor Syndrome. 2 of the best words are immolation and gut. With the first, you may not hear the screaming, often there is none. Monk sitting candid camera and cross-legged. Gut, plain autology, pure study itself. Sounds and seams and senses as is. Short shape, gutter organ, guttural rot. That second semester in school, my mind grew slim. I don't know why we called our easiest classes guts, but every grim morning assigned to faring the slink slope up Science Hill. No, not really a hill, a hillock. My body skid deep into seasonal affective disorder. My ornithology midterms begin. 1. What is a bird? I am embarrassed by my ancestors. Some were slavers, they marketed men. Never men as meat masterpieces, more meager than that. Morsels of muscle burnt by the brand of us Fulani. In turn, ancestors ashamed also of me. Why cannot the girl walk toward what we want? Will she thrill to our branding, the broad business of cages? And yeah, I think I have time to read the novel. So this is the first page of my novel, and I don't have a title for it yet. And I also cannot find, oh, here it is, okay. In one improbable origin story, an ancestor was captured as a slave and then released. The family legend goes that my father's great-grandfather, born in 1890, was kidnapped at the age of 9, along with other children as they played outside one ordinary day at the turning of the century. In the village, no decent systems of defense stood against raiders and slavers. His alleged captors were Arab men on horses who came riding from the north between a narrow gap and 2 hills. They sold stolen children on a trans-Saharan caravan route as far as present-day Libya. According to this epic, my great-great-grandfather was trafficked to a watering hole, an unidentified oasis and way station somewhere in the sun-blinding mass of desert beyond Lake Chad. And there he was sold. I want to know how long that journey takes, by foot, beside camel, on horseback. Do I want to know his price? Before beginning the second leg of the northbound venture, his new masters performed a thorough inspection of their merchandise and discovered he had sores on his skin. They mistook him for a leper. His skin condition still runs in my family on my father's side, but only resembles leprosy to the paranoid. It is a hereditary fungal infection with the scientific name Tinea versicolor. My siblings invented for it a silly term, frou-frou. Lightly raised spots of a 1/4 inch spread across a body as a type of yeast that naturally lives on skin and thrives in hot climates, grows out of control. It was the sun of the long march that afflicted the boy. Nowadays, it is easily cured by swallowing antifungal pills, washing with Selsun Blue dandruff shampoo, staying out of sun. It is neither painful nor contagious. Back then, my great-great-grandfather would not have known whether or when he would die. He was turned loose because of presumed leprosy. Thus, perversely, many close kin consider this affliction lucky. I am disfavored for never breeding it. My ancestor worked as an assistant to a merchant who helped him along his mazy way. Most marketeers spoke an Amazigh language, and he learned their words to muddle through. He made his way down to his village, backtracking the same route he had come across terrain then labeled Negro land. He walked a gauntlet of ranging geography: Sahel, Sudan, Sahara, Sub-Sahara, Savannah, steppe. He would have seen shrubland, scrubland, grassland, no woodland. He knew his people by their tribal marks: 3 vertical scars on both cheeks, 3 radiating from the corners of their mouths like whiskers. Blessed by chance encounters, he reunited with his clan an unknown extent of time after he was taken. We do know he lived his length of life in health and had many children. Of his spots, we, his descendants, joke that he was more leopard than leper. Though my father never laid eyes on it, he swears by heaven and by hell that somewhere there exists a leather arm patch etched with Arabic script. It indicates our forefather died free. If asked, how many times has disease saved your life? The liberated man's answer must be 1. And that's all I have. Thank you. I should note that that's actually a page from my memoir. So technically I haven't even really written a page of my novel, but it's a family legend that My family swears it's true. It's completely unbelievable. But I thought it was a great plot to start a fictionalized novel. So that's the genesis of that. And thank you so much for coming and for listening.
Okay. Thank you so much for reading your brilliant poetry to us. So I have a few questions, and then I'll turn it over to the audience for any questions if you guys have any. But you read just now part of your collection of poetry, and then part of your autobiography, and then you're also writing a novel, right? So you definitely multi-talented and a cross-genre poet, right? So I was really curious about how you like to approach the concept of genre and the writing process through that focus.
I approach everything as poetry, which can be practically a little bit difficult, because so my memoir is formatted. It's like wide, justified, Georgia, 12.5. And the line breaks were incredibly important. I looked at everything kind of like a prose poem. And some people think that with prose poems, like the line breaks don't matter, or where the line ends don't matter. I disagree. But of course, when it was published, they wouldn't even entertain keeping the same lineation and line break. So it was kind of a waste of time. But somewhere out there, only in my computer, there exists a version of my memoir that is justified and formatted like an extended prose poem. And it's important to me because it was part of my process. I have to think about the end of the line. And it's actually the same with the novel. So that's why it's taking me so long to write, because I'm not just thinking about the plot and the characters, but also the way it looks on the page, the white space, and the form. And I know that's incorrect. Like every novelist I've ever met said that this is just the worst possible way to go about it. And it wasn't a great way to go about the memoir either. My editors were so angry, like, why is it taking you so long to edit this? And I said, because each line is like a line of poetry to me. And I don't know how to break out of that. I think even though I do write different genres, to me, personally, I think poetry is the
ultimate medium.
I'm trying not to compare, but yeah, I think it's like the best genre in terms of the way it makes me feel emotionally. And it's not about just my emotions. I think it's, I feel pulled to it in a way that I don't do the other genres. I enjoy writing memoirs, and I enjoy writing the novel, but it just doesn't feel the same.
Right. It's like a poet writing a novel. The obsession is still in the poetic element of it, would you say?
Yeah.
Oh.
That's why poets can write novels and memoirs, but novelists can't write poems.
I see. So on that idea of the obsession with the poetic element, in class you did tell us at right at the start of the semester, it's let yourself be obsessed and write about that obsession. So I'm really curious about your obsessions, especially the whole idea in the last poem that you read from your collection, what the fresh hell is this? Mm-hmm. And you don't believe in reincarnation, but your final poem in that collection is about reincarnation.
Mm-hmm. So this is kind of a difficult question for me to answer, because I've recently been going back to my first collection and asking myself why I wrote certain things when they go against my philosophy and my beliefs. And on one level, I believe it's because I didn't really write my poems. I think my poems are a form of received communication. And a lot of my students, you mentioned this, that the poems come to you in that liminal state when you're about to fall asleep. And you just kind of think of a line of poetry. And so a lot of my ideas for poems did not really come from what I would call myself. I just kind of absorbed or received them from somewhere. They were generated and they came to me whole. And I think with some of the ideas for these random things that I don't really believe in, I think there are versions of myself that do, my subconscious, maybe my, I have a very active dream life. I always fall asleep watching true crime documentaries. So I wake up in the middle of the night, people screaming. I have terrible sleep hygiene, but this all infects my dreams. So I think a lot of it's just coming from environmental influences, things I hear here and there that I'm fascinated by. And so all of my poems are persona poems. I always make that very, very, very clear at every reading I do. They are not autobiographical. Even when I refer to myself as Mary Alice, I am not the speaker of the poem. And so that allows me to write about very dark things without people assuming that that's my personal opinion or perspective.
Right, so the idea of persona is so interesting because I swear every single reading and talk I've been to with POC poets, they always say their first collection is their most restricted collection. Mm-hmm. So I was really curious on that, and I know this is a question that probably all POC writers and creators are tired of hearing. But what is your take on identity and writing? Because I know some poets are famously find almost a feeling of obligation in their first collection, having to salvage history and culture from white imagination. How do you find yourself in a part of that? Do you feel restrained from it, or?
Well, I think that the part of my identity that I explore most in my book is the religious influences. So I'm from the north of Nigeria, and it's over 99% Islamic. And we have a rich tradition of Sufi poetry, actually from the 19th century, the golden age of Islam. And that combined with my parents, who are, evangelical Christians, Pentecostal. And so I was raised in that tradition. And my father was actually at a Catholic missionary boarding school. So Catholicism, Islam. Nigeria also has a religion called Chrislam that combines the two along with our indigenous spiritualities. All that feeds into my work in a way that kind of reflects the confusion, the chaos, the layered aspect of my upbringing and the contradictions and the traumas. But I think it's fascinating to work within this realm of the spirit world that I don't believe in, so there's a distance there, and I find that space to be just very interesting. Yeah.
I see. So now bringing up religion, I also really did want to talk about your choice of title for your first collection, mm-hmm. Mass for Shut-ins, mm-hmm. and you do talk about it in the book, on one of the first pages.
Yeah.
But I was still curious about it because, when I read the title, the first thing I thought of was COVID lockdown, because we all became shut-ins looking for God in sourdough, right? Mm. And so I was really curious, did your writing process of the book, did the title have anything to do with those experiences? Because I know you have been writing this collection for 10 years.
Yeah. No, definitely had nothing to do with COVID. So it was in 2012. I was living in Detroit. I went to the Fox 2 TV studio, and I was just wandering around doing a tour, and there was a stage for a TV show called Mass for Shut-ins, and I was just why is it called that? It could have been called televised mass or mass for home viewers, but the fact that it was called Mass for Shut-ins, and that's such an archaic word, I found that awkwardness of language so fascinating. And then I found out that another poet had the same title. So I spent some time thinking of other titles, really terrible ones, Yikes and Babblement, which I've never met anybody who liked before. And then I decided to just go with my gut. As soon as I saw that, I knew that was going to be the title of my first book. But I still, as much as I knew it, I had these moments of uncertainty. I had a dream where my brother was like, call it ass for shut-ins. Like, the people want ass, give them ass. Like, the sex sells, give them ass. And I was like, I'm not going to call it ass for shut-ins. But I remember this nightmare, and I was like, is it the right title? And then my agent, she emailed me, and she accidentally called it mass for shit-ins. And she immediately apologized. She's like, I'm so sorry. I don't know, like, what happened. And I thought it was funny, but I was just like, I don't know, like, these weird things keep happening with these titles. Is it the right one? But now I can't imagine it being called anything else.
I see. Some interesting alternatives.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have another follow-up question, just again on like the design and cover of your book. If we didn't know, she actually designed her own cover, this beautiful cover of her first collection. And I was just really curious, like, why this scorpion? It seems so, unrelated to the title, but like, is it just based on vibes?
No, there's so in the book it's divided into sections that have warning symbols preceding them and following them. Radioactivity, biohazard, the evil eye symbol, and a couple others, I forgot. The general caution of fire, yeah. And so there's an image in a poem where I talk about scorpions, how they glow in the dark. And scorpions are a natural warning symbol, the way they are bioluminescent. It's a creature that ties both deserts of California and of Nigeria. So when my publishing company sent me the first cover, I actually cried. It was so bad. It really was just inexplicably bad. Is this being recorded? Is it? Okay. It was inexplicably bad, but I liked the image of the glowing scorpion. So they came up with that idea. But the execution was like horrible. And they sent me one that looked like a balloon animal. They sent me one that looked like a robot, which I actually kind of liked. But it was, my best friend is a graphic designer. So I designed it, but I didn't actually like make it. I just told him what I wanted. So I found this image, and I said I wanted it to glow, and the name and the title are now standardized. They want all books from now on to be recognizable as part of a series. So starting with The Year Before Me, they are all having that kind of like border. But within that, I was like, what can I do that's, weird? And so that's what I came up with. And they still tried to put their house designer as the designer of the cover. And I had to like really be adamant and say, no, I need my friend's name on there. So if you see on the back, like it does say, it has the in-house designer who did absolutely nothing. He didn't do anything. And then my friend Juan Castillo. And so when I first got my first shipment of books, I didn't open the box for about a week because I was so scared that it wouldn't glow. Because I know it looks different on the screen than in real life. I was like, it's not going to glow. It's not going to be like black enough, inky enough. I know they've messed this up somehow. And then I opened it and it glowed, and I was really happy. And I'm happy every time I look at it, just because it reminds me of my friend and the culmination of 10 years of late nights and misery, frustration, but also I do feel proud of it. You said that you never met somebody who liked their first book. I might change my mind.
I've never met an Asian. Maybe that's the difference, I think we should be proud of our first collections.
I understand why some people feel like they rushed it. Like all of my publications individually, I regret all of them. Like the poems were published in journals beforehand. And that's why I hate it when people like search me online and read the poems that were published, because I'm like, they're terrible. But the versions that exist in the book, I do like most of them, with some exceptions.
That's really great. I'm really glad that it like turned out that way
Yeah.
for you. But I'm gonna ask one more question before
Okay.
turning it to the audience because I think we are running out of time.
Check.
But are we? Oh, we're good.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we can take our time on this question because it is quite broad. But
We have 8 minutes, actually.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll talk more then. But
Okay.
but I do wanted to like ask you, like, if you would like to explain to us your perception of what a poet does, because I feel like so many people in this like late capitalist society either think poetry is like worthless or it'll make your network worthless. So like what is your like response to this like phenomenon, especially like the value of other like career paths beyond humanities?
When somebody says poetry is worthless, you remember what we say to them in class.
And Carson.
Do you remember? We say, look what 1,000 blue thousand white, blue thousand, white thousand, blue thousand, white thousand, blue thousand, white thousand, blue thousand, white thousand, blue arms blowing down the road, right? So people who think that poetry is useless, worthless, nonsensical. I have my students memorize this, and I think maybe I messed up a.
The last part.
Yeah, the assignment
okay, no one knows.
The assignment isn't due yet. So, but I do all of my assignments with my students, so I'm also memorizing it. I'm not quite there yet. I think it's the perfect rejoinder for these people who say poetry doesn't matter, it's meaningless, and then to recite this poem that is on its surface also nonsensical. What that does, in my opinion, is that it confirms their bias, and it's actually the best revenge because it denies them the absolute sublime, I think, experience of reading a poem that is just amazing, right? And if they've gotten to the point where they've read poetry and they cannot appreciate it, I feel very sorry for them because it means they haven't had that experience. And so I recite the Anne Carson as revenge, but also as a gift because, I mean, I think she's brilliant. So if, you know, in a few years they might look back or think back on this poem and wonder what it's about, look up her work, read Wolftown, or read one of any number, Ghost Q&A. I think I'm giving them a gift, and they might discover poetry. I think a lot of people just haven't come across the right poem. In terms of what a poet does, we obsess over minutiae. I don't know who said poetry is the act of noticing. I mentioned that in class yesterday. I forgot who said it, so I'm going to say I said it. It could be someone else. I'm not trying to plagiarize. I just don't remember. So when I don't remember, I'm like, it could have been me. So I'll quote myself, or maybe it was Mary Oliver. I'm not sure. It's the act of noticing. So I believe that we are witnesses to things, to humanity, to events, and we are always existing in this space where we are kind of at a remove, and we decide the perspective and the persona that we want to take to comment on humanity. And a lot of people don't find this commentary useful, and it doesn't really concern me. I'm struggling with this in our class, articulating like the point. Because there are different types of poets, right? There are people who write poetry as a hobby, and I want to encourage that. I want everybody to write poetry. I want everybody to write bad poetry. It's just a good practice. It's a good thing to do. But there are people who want to take it seriously enough that they publish books and they kind of make it a career. And I think I have a mix in my class. And it's hard to tailor the class to satisfy both. Because the people who think of poetry as a hobby don't always have the internal motivation, the will, the drive, the voice talking to them, compelling them to write. And ultimately, that's what poets do. We are not productive. So most of my best friends aren't poets. They're either scholars or doctors, or one is a human rights activist, one is a graphic designer. And they're always like, what do you do? Like, what is it that you're doing? Because sometimes I have like 5 poems to show in a year. And they're like, why do you pull all-nighters when you like don't have anything to wake up for? You don't really have deadlines, yet you're constantly like up all night. You're constantly like working like 80-hour weeks, but it doesn't actually seem like you do anything. And what I'm doing is I'm reading, I'm memorizing poems, I am messing with the commas in my poems, I'm taking them all out, putting them all back in, printing it out, reading it the next day, changing it back to where it was. So it looks like on paper I haven't done anything. But what I'm doing is paying attention to the craft and asking myself questions about how to construct the poem I want to write. And I really only want to write one good poem. One poem that's like the poems I've shared with you. That's just like heartbreaking, just stops you in your tracks, and you're just like, how did this person do it? And then I'll just die happy. That's all I want. And if I do that, if I accomplish that, right, it doesn't sound like I'm really doing anything my whole life, but I think that's enough.
One really quick follow-up questions on that, because I know you say like the work of a poet never ends, and you still edit your poems compulsively after publishing, and it has been 10 years writing this. So I just wanted to ask, like, when do you decide it's enough? This can go to the publisher, this can be put out into the world?
Oh, those deadlines are arbitrary. So the contest deadlines I send out, usually the night before. When I submitted to the Yale, I almost didn't, and that was going to be the last year I could submit, because I actually used a lot of lines in my memoir. I was like, this is never going to be published, so I might as well get some use out of them. I really didn't think I would win. When I won, I had to go to my editors at HarperCollins, like, I need more time because I have to take these lines out. I didn't want the repetition. Like, it didn't make sense. So I work with the publisher's deadlines, but I don't consider that my deadline. So after the poem is published in a journal, I'm still editing for the book. And then after the book was published, I really don't know why I'm still editing the book. Maybe if I live long enough, there might be like a collected volume, which I doubt. You have to have like a lot of books for that. And I write so slowly, and I'm writing different genres. I don't know if there'll ever be these other versions published, but it's important to me to fix them because, again, if they're not done, it's physically uncomfortable for me. It bothers me if I see something in a poem and I think it should have been changed. For example, in the poem I just read, originally it was Mary Alice, Sheepdog of Information. And I was just like, this obviously should be Sheepdog of Misinformation. Not just for the sound, but for the fact that I introduce all these versions of facts in the book and myths and half-truths and untruths. I'm just like, that's why. And so I edit just so I have a record of growth and progress, and I feel good that it never ends, actually. A lot of people hate that. It never feels satisfying. But to me, I like that feeling. Because I guess maybe it just always feels like I'm busy, I have something to do. If it's never finished, then there's there's always some kind of meaning to the work I'm doing.
Yeah, truly a labor of love and perfectionism.
Yeah, actually that sounds kind of sad now that I
No.
articulate that.
No.